Okay, good afternoon and welcome back to the resumption of our special council. Councillors Gazzola and Singh, I believe you have something you want to say at the beginning?
Yeah, there was an item that came up in caucus today that I wasn't aware that I have a possible conflict of interest, and so I declared it at the caucus meeting, item number 2, and item number 1 was somewhat related to it, I understand, and so I need to declare conflict on both items number 1 and 2. I don't think I have a conflict, but I do have to declare it to be on the safe side. Okay. And it's to do with, I have a family member that's employed by
one of the parties.
One of the principals in the discussion.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Singh.
Yeah, on the items 1 and 2 discussed that were interrelated, I had to declare conflict of interest due to family members that own real estate that's adjoining to some discussion of real estate property there. So.
Okay, thank you. Before we start, Councillor Galloway? Oh, okay. Okay, great, thank you. We will then move on to, we might as well do the ones that we know everyone's here for. We'll start then with item number 7, since that's what staff are here for, which is the Battler Snow Storage Disposal Facility. And Mr. Gross. And this is really items 7 and 8. As you know, they're interrelated. We need to deal with 7 first, and then depending on that decision, we may or may not be dealing with number 8. Did you have any, no presentation or anything? Okay. Folks see number 7 in front of them. Does somebody want to move it? Questions first? Okay. Councillor Galloway, Councillor Singh.
Oh, okay, all right. Just in relation to the increased tender price, that's, I know the amount number is fairly high for the tender itself, but 600,000 increase is a fair amount. Is that attributed to just, I guess, timing, or why were we so, out of line with our budgeting?
Mr. Gross.
Through the chair, when the budget was set back in September of 15, there was a range of budget that was identified for a project of this nature. And based on the information that was available at the time, there was a budget that was suggested for this project. As we worked through the project, through the detailed design, through the approvals, it became apparent that there were more items that would be required for this project in order to get it up and running. A lot of those had to do with environmental requirements, higher berm, higher noise wall, had to do with additional studies that needed to be done. It had to do with Grand River Conservation Authority, additional requirements from them in terms of environmental protection. It really evolved around primarily environmental items.
Just not related to timing of construction season or related to these are legislative requirements that we would have to meet, right? Or requirements that we would have to meet, right?
That is correct. Once we had the detailed design in place, which was at the end of June, we had a PIC June 22nd, if I'm not mistaken, and at that time we were about, I'd say, 95% complete with our design. We went to tender on July 8th.
Okay.
So during that time we finished things off, and the tenders that we received were, the low tender was within 7% of the pre-tender estimate
Right.
that we did for that project.
Mr. Gross, when the tender comes in as high as it has, and from your earlier answer, it appears that the increase is due to site conditions related, right? Why not then step back and say, okay, you know what, let's then reassess and perhaps look, I know it's onerous work, but perhaps alternate site that could meet in line to the budgeted amount.
I believe if you go back to the September report, there is no other site that would come in for that budgeted amount. Even if you went to the COF, and I know that was one that was discussed. The COF itself is has about 1/4 of the capacity of this particular site. Back in 2009, when we did the estimate for the COF, it came in at about $2.5 million. If you escalate that up to today's costs, you're into $3.2 million. And I recall at the time, and I looked back in the report, that cost does not include any noise containment at that site. And at this point, it's in a wellhead protection zone 4, which is a much higher zone area than the current Battler site. So the cost, if you're looking at cost, is not going to be less for that site.
That's fair, and I think the questions are going to get raised again as they have in the past of can we not just continue on doing things the way we've already been, and I can appreciate that's not the case, and the report says that obviously we need to meet our certain environmental requirements on how we remediate the snow that's collected. But we're building for the future here. I'm guessing that's why the cost related. To what time frame are we building this site for? It obviously will meet our current requirements. We're not going to get a huge price tag in another 10 years and saying that we need a larger site or additional expanded works to this site.
Through the chair, the short answer is no. That site is capable of taking snow from an average winter right through to a severe winter. In a severe event winter, the snow would be piled about approximately 10 to 12 meters high.
As we grow out as a city and we have
Correct.
more roadways, so.
Correct. And, I mean, if you look at the southwest part of Kitchener, there's limited growth that's coming down the pike.
Okay. So for the foreseeable future, this site will accommodate our requirements.
Yes.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Well, and Mr. Gross, just on that last point, I mean, part of the reality is that the need for doing snow removal and taking it to a facility like Battler in new subdivisions is considerably less than in the old parts of the city because the road widths are wider and so on, correct?
That's correct.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Councillor Fernandez, you're next.
Yes, so what I'm hearing is we have a $660,000 increase in our expected cost. There's a lot of material at Battler Road. Will we be using any of that material to help build that noise abatement wall?
Through the chair, the material that will be used has stayed there. Some material has left the site, and other material that we were not able to get rid of, which cannot be used, will leave the site as part of this contract. The short answer is yes, there is some material there that can be used, but not all of it.
So has some of the material that you've been removing, some of the material that you cannot move, is the reason you cannot move it is because it is contaminated?
The reason is it has no value to anyone.
So, but there is contamination on the site, right?
To my knowledge, the only materials that were there that could have contamination would be the asphalt.
Right. Has that added any cost to the site?
Yeah. The answer is no, it's been removed.
Okay. I mean, none of what you're saying is coming as a surprise to me, because in the initial meetings we had with residents, and I raised these concerns right from the get-go because of its proximity to Strasburg Creek. So I guess I would really like to see a very detailed statement breaking out where these additional costs are. It's fine to say that it's part of Grand River Conservation Authority and part of the ministry's guidelines, but this is a huge number. This is over $500,000. This represents a huge increase in this project. Are you able to provide that for us?
I can provide you with with some of the major pieces that added to it. The other part of it is that some of the unit prices that came in were higher than we estimated, but I can give you some of the dollars that were attributed to those things. Approximately, there's about $100,000 in additional studies that we had to do. The scope, the EIS, the hydrogeologic, stormwater, surface water impact, discharge to the sanitary sewer, noise, barn swallows, and monitoring of the creek. So there were at least $100,000 extra in studies. The GRCA pieces there were things such as rock check dams, heavy-duty silt fencing, and other items which added up to between $80,000 and $100,000. There was removal of unsuitable material, which is what I talked about earlier, which was around $60,000. There's removal of retaining walls, and one of the things that there wasn't estimated at the time was that there was a building that has to be removed. The existing asphalt stockpile, that's about $40,000. The noise wall and the berm had to be increased because of the noise abatement. That's approximately $125,000. Some soft areas that needed to be excavated, they're in the order of about $50,000. The washroom that we had added, which was an afterthought, granted, was about $60,000. Those are the major pieces.
Okay. I mean, it's like saying to a young person, "I told you so. This was going to cost you a lot more money, so I don't want to go there." I just really have a hard time with adding another huge cost to this, and I wonder if there are ways that we can navigate this a little bit better. If there are other areas that we can reduce our costs. There's no question in my mind that some of these were ones that we should have known about and planned for. I may have some more questions after I hear other council, because I know my time is up.
Yep, thank you. Councillor Galloway-Sealock.
I've balked at the price tag right off the bat, and to see this here is not pleasant, and it's not from the work that you've done. But it's a result of what's going on. I've asked this in the past, and I cannot, for the life of me, seem to find the report with the answers in it. But I know that in late 2015, before budget, I asked about the size of the pad. the actual, what's termed melting pad, even though it's not really, it's just a concrete pad, right? With this tender coming in at the price it did, have we looked at the opportunity to decrease the pad size? Because that is one of the most significant expenses. I do not remember all the detail on, we needed it for this because of the 10-year storm, but our average storm, it's much larger. Can we have that discussion right now on pad size and whether or not we can reduce the scope of that, which probably will reduce the cost of the overall project significantly?
The cost of the pad actually came in less per square meter than what we had estimated. That's one thing. The pad size is 240,000 square meters, which I believe is the smaller size that you had talked about, if I'm not mistaken. I'm not sure about that. Dan? I wasn't at those original meetings, so you'll have to forgive me on that answer.
Mr. Locke?
So the capacity of the site was looked at, and it was deemed that if we were going to build that to handle the snow for our growing community and look at how many years it would serve us for the future, now is the time to look at a full site, and the pad being reduced may impact having to come back and do more at some point in time in the not too distant future. So we looked at that. With the 1 year, I'm going to say 2013, I think was the heavy year, had us with 240,000 cubic meters of snow, and that caused, that's what we used as a model that this community would see in a very heavy year as the extreme. And as this community grows, I think that the reality is you may see more than that. With the weather trends that we're seeing, it's obviously a bit of a guess with changing climate changes happening, but what we've seen in the recent years was what we used as an indicator and what the consultant used to project what our needs would be. So based on that, to reduce, it didn't seem to make the most sense for what we are doing now. Now would be when you get the most cost-effective way of moving forward.
So basically, the pad that we have will accommodate us currently if we have another snow season like 2013, but we haven't had one of those since. So we could come up with various options, not today, to deal with overflow if we needed to in the future. Can you tell me what the percentage of cost is the actual pad itself of the $3 million that came in?
The tender itself is 2.6 million.
Right.
With the city's HST, the pad, if I recall, was 1.4, 1.5 million.
So if we decrease that by even 40 square meters or by a fifth, we could decrease our cost substantially. At least make a dent in what is a $660,000 increase.
Through the
and not
chair,
impact our snow removal site to a great extent.
through the chair, Mr. Mayor, I would recommend not doing that simply because what you have are vehicles moving from the north end of the site to the south, dumping the snow. I would not feel very comfortable in not preparing the proper base for that entire site at this time. Really, the only savings that you're going to get, in my view, in order to safeguard infiltration and the environment that we're trying to protect below, would be to save on the asphalt top. But even the asphalt top is what makes it impermeable. With the trucks moving and the dozers pushing snow, I would strongly recommend against decreasing the size at this point.
But you're going to be keeping all the snow still on the pad. In 9 out of 10 seasons, we'll probably be keeping, and I know my time's up, but we'll be using that site, and only 9 out of 10, if I remember correctly, we need that full capacity. So instead of, I'm all about making sure we have all the environmental regulations in place underneath the pad. I've been at every PIC. I've looked at the way it filters into the bottom where the silt's going to go. I've looked at the drainage turnoffs. I've looked at the emergency backups. I've listened to everything that you've said at every meeting we've gone to, and I still come back to the fact that A, the price to begin with was hard to swallow, and B, now you're coming back for an extra $660,000, and I think we have to draw the line somewhere. And I ask you to look at a 1/5 or something more reasonable, in your professional opinion, to decrease that price. And is it possible, keeping all the environmental regulations in place, and just have a smaller concrete pad, which then decreases the amount of underneath work we have to do? I know it's not going to service every single year the city has a major snowfall. I get that. But is it better than no facility at all?
In answer to your last question, the answer is yes, obviously. In answer to the question, can the pad be reduced in size? Yes, it can be reduced in size. I guess the question is, to what degree are you asking that it be reduced? And, does it make it feasible and worthwhile if we did that?
Ms. Fletcher, you wanted to add something? Hold on, I got too many people clicked in. Go ahead, Ms. Fletcher.
Through the mayor, just as council's considering the information and the questions and the options, if we go back to Councillor Singh's question, his question was, are we building for today and will this service us longer term in the future? And the answer was yes. So if we reduce the pad today and we find in 5 years we need to increase the pad size, it will not come in at $660,000. So something to consider. We have the economies of scale while we're building right now. If we do have the 1 in 10 snow winters that Councillor Galloway-Seelock is talking about, our option is likely to truck the excess snow out of this community. There's nowhere else for us to put it. So just something for council to consider.
I think there has been other options that are much smaller scale that we might be able to deal with in those, but I don't want to get into that debate. My time's way up, so I'll wait.
Okay, you can come back. Councillor Marsh.
Thank you, Mary Brvanovic. So my question is regarding these options that staff have come up with to potentially lower our costs. What would be the impact of removing the washroom facility from the scope of work? Will the staff who are working in the truck, dumping the snow there, then have to go out of well out of their way to use the facilities and waste their time? Or can you expand on what would be the impact of not having a washroom?
Through the mayor, the washroom facility was intended as for 3 purposes. One was a washroom, another was a first aid station, and the third one was a mechanical electrical room for the electrical needs of the site. Now, we can remove the washroom. What we would do is put portable toilets on the site. In terms of the first aid, there would be no first aid kit on the site. That would have to be contained in the trucks of the various truckers. The electrical, what we would do is we would just put up 2 4x4s with a plywood, a piece of plywood, and we would mount the electrical panel there, like we do in other places, let's say sewage pumping stations that don't have a building. We would simply mount a frame and put it there. So we felt that's one area that, yes, we can save some money. It's not the best, but yeah, there it is.
And so if I ask again, what's the impact on the staff?
The impact on the staff is that they will have to use the portable toilets.
Right. Okay. And what about the impact of not landscaping along Battler Road? I mean, are there neighbors close by that would have an eyesore to look at the entire time, or what?
The landscape along Battler, excuse me, the landscaping that we're talking about setting aside is not the grass and the topsoil. It has to be seeded, it has to be topsoiled to get the GRCA approval. What we would be deleting would be the shrubs, the smaller trees, the plantings, if you will, for the side of the hill for that area. The reason that I suggested removing that is because over the next 2 years, 3 years, we have to extend a large storm sewer along that side of Battler Road. And at that time, in order to do that, we would be excavating that area and then restoring it. So,
okay, that sounds like that makes...
you can leave that out.
Yeah.
If you put it in now, those plantings would simply be dug out, set aside, and replanted.
Okay, that context is very helpful. Thank you.
Councillor Gazzola.
Yeah, I want a couple of clarification points first. I take it that this is on the council agenda and a decision is binding tonight.
Correct.
It's not coming back. My next question is, can it be deferred, can a decision be deferred until August the 29th at our next council meeting? Does the question is, does the tender run out before that, or would the tender still be in place?
Through Mr. Mayor, the tender would still be in place. However, the timelines are even now very tight. We were hoping to be under construction at this point. Even with today's, if it were awarded today, it's very, very tight to get it constructed and operational by December the 2nd. If it's deferred another couple of weeks, it makes it worse. We may not be able to get it up and running.
You didn't hear that we're not getting any snow until January?
I don't have my crystal ball with me, I'm sorry.
Okay, my next question now, this is, what happens if this council, in its wisdom, turns this down? What happens?
Through the chair, there are only a couple of spots, Graber Place, which is daytime, and the Bram Street, which has a melting location, and neither of which are really very, very good to use.
Okay, I thank you for your answer. I thought you were going to come back and say the sun isn't going to come up. So it might be possible to do something. The next question is, we hired a consultant to do a lot of work on this since it was originally here, and I noticed you even said we spent $100,000 extra in studies. What all have we spent on consultants up to this point?
Through the chair, my estimate, and I anticipated a question like that, my estimate is that the city has spent in the order of $400,000 from the time that a site was first identified, or potential sites were identified, because we did investigations at the COF, we did investigations at the auditorium, we did investigations at Graber Place. We've done all of the design work for this site. We've done all of the studies that were required for this site. I estimate that the city has spent in the order of $400,000 in bringing us to this point.
Okay. My last question deals with where you are recommending that the funding come from is the Development Charge Recovery Reserve. Now, what does that mean? Is the development charges are ultimately paying for this?
Mr. Chapman?
Through the chair, in the previous DC study, there were a number of projects, including the KOF and the Central Library, where we were capped out in terms of how much could be funded from development charges within the 10-year window. To complete the projects, we paid for more out of the tax base, but we can continue to recover in successive periods the cost of growth. And so those funds come into this reserve, and they can be expended like any other tax-supported funding.
Okay, but they do come out of the development charges.
That's correct, yes.
Yeah. But on the other hand, when they come out of there are other things that can come out of there.
That's correct.
Down the road. So even though it's not a direct hit to the taxpayer, it still is an indirect in the fullness of time.
That's correct. Right now, even with this expenditure, though, we would still be within the amount of funding from the KOF project that's being recovered.
Okay, thank you. We'll have some comments at the comment time. Thank you.
Councillor Ioannidis.
Thank you, Mayor Verbanovich. I guess some of my questions have been answered, but the one question is that I would like to get a better understanding is the trucking of snow and what those types of costs would be if we had to go that route. I would like a better answer, because for me, that's a definitive. If it's a certain cost there, this would make this decision easy for me.
Are you talking what Cynthia Fletcher
That's right.
talked about? Okay. Through the chair, I think that would be a tendered process, and it would be determined by how far they has to go. So obviously we'd be looking at putting something out on the street to say we need snow removal services and a site that can take them. And I don't have a gauge on what that might look like coming back in. So,
okay. I kind of have a little bit of an idea just from my own properties and how much it costs to snow remove, and I can imagine on a sea level, it won't be inexpensive.
Well, just to be clear, to help out Councillor Ioannidis, I mean, staff are not saying that we wouldn't need to truck. I mean, there's still extensive trucking involved, both by city crews and non-city crews, to the dumping facility, wherever it ends up being. The question is, I think what you're getting at is what's the incremental cost if we don't have a site within the boundaries of the city of Kitchener to go to one in the townships or wherever. What's that extra cost going to be?
Yeah, that's what I was getting at, because I know what it costs when the properties that I've managed over my time, and if you don't have adequate facilities, you're really just fooling around, and I don't want us to fool around when it comes to this type of level service, because this is something that we hear on a constant basis from residents, and whether or not this council or whatever commits to having the sidewalks removed, there's going to be additional snow there. So we have to think a little better than just dollars and cents on this option, because there could be service levels changes in the future that will necessitate even more snow dumping. So I'm prepared to move the option D when the time's appropriate.
Okay, I'll come back to you. Councillor Davey.
Thank you. First, Councillor Gazzola asked actually my questions about wasn't entirely sure I heard. What is the current balance of the DC Recovery Reserve, at least approximately?
Mr. Chapman.
Through the chair, the 2015 ending balance was approximately $3.4 million, and the reserve is projected to decline based on current commitments to about $1.4 million by 2020.
Okay. And sir, and how is that reserve replenished?
Through development charges within the current term of our bylaw.
Okay.
So it is dependent on.
Okay. Thank you. So a couple questions just based on the options that are before us then. I just want to make sure I heard clearly that even if we were to go ahead with the landscaping work, much of it would get torn out anyway, so if anything, it's best to take a look at that in 2 years' time after the storm sewer has been installed. Is my understanding correct?
Through the chair, at the public meetings, we had promised the residents a certain level of landscaping around the berm. I hate to backtrack on that. I really want to make sure that the residents have something that is reasonable to look at visually. However, having said that, it is something that could be deferred for a couple of years simply because of the storm sewer installation. So it was a place where I felt perhaps you could save some money, although, as I said, I don't want to go against something that the residents were promised.
Presumably when we do some of these larger subsurface works, that there would be landscaping that occurs part of that storm sewer process anyway.
Through the chair, the storm sewer would be installed underneath the ditch which is being formed. So, you know, the ditch itself would be dug up, the pipe installed, the ditch replaced with topsoil and grasses, and then at that time either new plantings, or if the plantings go in now, they would be set aside and then they would simply be replaced.
Okay. In terms of the other item, the washroom, is there, like, are the costs of the porta potties going to be something that ends up costing more over the long term, or is there a health and safety benefit or requirement in terms of the first aid? I just want to make sure we're making the right decision on this in the long run.
Yeah. Through the chair, the porta potties obviously aren't ideal. That's why we wanted to add this. But in lieu of that, the options for trucking, just so you get a bit of a flavor for that, some of it's at night, so there's not a lot of places open. Some of them are contractors, so that they don't have access to our building at the COF. So it was added in an attempt to create an efficiency. So in lieu of that, porta potties would serve that purpose. The first aid, I expect that we would have a sufficient amount of city vehicles on the site pushing the snow up and things like that that would have first aid kits in them that would be sufficient for any issues that we would have.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Councillors Fernandez and Gazzola, you've already asked. Councillor Singh, have you asked questions already? Okay, Councillor Marsh, you haven't yet. You have, okay. So I'm just going to ask one before I go into round two, and I'm going to preface it with, I mean, I'll be honest, and staff knows this. I'm struggling with this issue. It was a lot of money in the first time we dealt with it, and it's a lot more money now. And I really want to understand, and where I'm struggling with it is the options, quite frankly, that have been brought forward are fairly minimal in terms of options. And I know a lot of work's gone into it, but they're built around trim a little here, trim a little there. But there aren't any more significant options that have been brought forward. You know, does it merit, instead of rushing a decision today, take a little more time? Can we rent a second melter? You know, I've gone online and there's a number of places, and I know I was told before that you can't rent melters. There's a number of places that do melt melters, and other municipalities have rented them. You know, have we explored those kinds of options, and why was none of that sort of looked at and brought here as part of this report?
Through the chair. Renting a melter hasn't been something that we've investigated with this because we're looking for a permanent solution. Brom Street has a bit of a ticking clock to it for how long that'll be available to us, and that's where we traditionally melt. Anywhere that we do melt, we want to have some environmental constraints put in place, a storm scepter. Those things aren't in place everywhere. To go that route, it's also very costly to melt. The fuel costs are very high for melting when we're melting, and there's still the trucking costs, all those things. So we are trying to make a more feasible solution to the snow disposal.
Well, I understand that. I guess my question, though, is in order to not rush a decision today, should we not be looking at some of those options so that we can go back? I mean, one of the things that concerns me, we're late in the tender season. Have we seen tender inflation that typically happens late in the season impact the price of this project? And if we go back in the winter months with a new tender, or maybe and use that the time to intervene and look at some things, will that help us see the cost come down on the original project?
Mr. Mayor, in regard to that question, the tender estimate, pre-tender estimate that we developed was 7% lower than the low tender. So the low tender was within 7%, and 4 of those low tenders were very, very close together. What that tells me is that the tendering is very competitive and the prices are about right.
Okay. So I guess my last question is, so if council were to say no to this issue, how does that impact winter 2016? I mean, we're still going to have to do things. And if we assume Graber Place isn't an option, what's the game plan going to be?
Through the chair, just strictly with the one melter that we have, we wouldn't be able to keep up. So we would have to use Graber during the daytime and melt as much snow as we could possibly melt. That would be the options for the short term. Looking at renting an additional melter certainly could be looked at.
Ms. Fletcher?
I think the other thing to consider in terms of renting a melter, we would have to do a full investigation of where we would set up that melter. One of the things that staff was looking at in terms of, as Mr. Locke has indicated, in terms of a long-term solution, is the Ministry of the Environment requirements keep getting stricter and stricter. So we were trying to set ourselves up for a long-term solution. We have contracts with the region that we didn't want to put in jeopardy, and as has been indicated, we are a growing community, and we're planning and projecting for growth as well.
Okay. Going to round 2 of questions. Councillor Fernandez.
Thanks. Just tagging on to that comment, Ms. Fletcher, my understanding is that we don't do snow loading in the new areas because we just heard that the roads are wider and that we usually do the snow loading from the downtown core and the smaller, narrower streets. So which is it? Is it that we're snow loading all over the city, we're snow loading only in the downtown core, or are we snow loading downtown core and some specific areas? Can we have a definitive comment on that?
So through the chair, the primary areas that we load on any given year is the downtown, curb-faced sidewalk streets like Weber Street, those Victoria Street where accumulations just go back and forth between the road and the sidewalk. We also see in new subdivisions where there's things like zero lot lines and there's just isn't the snow storage on the boulevard, so it impacts out into the roadway that we need to go into those to maintain that street width. So Activa is one of the examples. Some of the subdivisions off of Huron Road, the new ones there, also have issues that way. So we are going into new subdivisions as well. It's I think the report from September showed some of the pockets around the city and what that looked like, the consultant's report that was brought forward in September last year. So it's not just strictly the downtown and that, but there is some subdivisions that are impacted as well.
Okay, so any subdivisions that we're seeing that may be coming on board that have that zero lot line would be areas that we would, that's the areas of growth that you're saying that we would be needing to do snow loading?
Potentially, and from my experience is that the newer subdivisions are trying to maximize how many builds they can get into it, so it reduces the distance between driveways, bigger driveways, less boulevard area for storage, and again, that's the areas that we have to go then and help out with.
Okay, yeah, I think that's perfect. So we have an existing trailer on site. Is there no ability for us to use that trailer? I mean, there's a washroom in there, in a lunchroom area in there. Why wouldn't we use that as a? I mean, it's already there.
Through the chair, that trailer is not in good condition. It would be fairly old now. It may get us through a few years, but it would not last near the time frame that the other things are. So it would be something that may help us in a short term.
I was going to say, as an interim solution, if we want to find a way to reduce, even though it's small reductions, as an interim solution. I mean, it's been fine as long as it's been there, and staff have been using it. The other, I really wish that staff had brought forward the site plans, because I think it would have been really good for council to have seen the site plans and to see where some of the additional costs may have ramped up outside of all the studies that we were talking about. If this, and I'm leaning towards it, I don't know, Councillor Gazzola, did you talk about a deferral already? Okay. If we're leaning towards a deferral, maybe it would be prudent to have some of those visuals for us to see, and it might help the rest of council see what Councillor Galloway, Seelock, and I saw at those public meetings. Is that possible to do that?
Can we see them now?
I believe it's all online, isn't it?
Go ahead.
Okay. Sorry.
Sorry. Go ahead, Mr. Gross.
Mr. Mayor, I believe the drawings are online, if I'm not mistaken. We can certainly provide a link.
I'm sorry. We can certainly what?
We can provide a link to the drawings. I'm not exactly sure where they're located. Trying to think.
I understand that. I know that we can see them online, but I mean, I think it's good for everybody to see them all at the same time, and then we can have prudent questions that are related to that.
I think Mr. Gross's point was staff can bring it up on the screen right now so everyone can see it.
Thank you.
Okay, go ahead. Mr. Wilmer, you want to add something to that? Go ahead, Mr. Wilmer.
Just in terms of the impact of potentially deferring for 3 weeks, and Mr. Gross alluded to this as well, the timeline is tight already, and the idea of having this complete by early December was not so much that we're loading snow in December. We typically don't start loading snow till late January or February. It's because the paving season ends then, and there's no guarantee that we'll still have access to asphalt for paving from late November on. So that's really the critical path here, is about getting this done by the end of paving season.
So I have one last question.
Go ahead.
The DC Reserve Fund, Mr. Chapman, you said is sitting at 1.4 by 2020. Can you give us what it would be sitting at by the end of 2016 or 2017?
Through the mayor, first for clarity, this is the DC Recovery Reserve, so this is a capital project.
Yes, sorry, that's what I meant.
And we're projecting no change in 2016, and it actually increases in 2017 before it starts to fall off.
Okay, so there really wouldn't be any projects that would be deferred or related to the reduction of that reserve?
Not at this point, no.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Councillor Gazzola.
Yeah. my intention is not to support this today, and therefore I wanted to bring up a deferral till the 29th. Okay, I have some comments, but I just want to make it clear that I'm going to ask for a deferral until the 29th.
And the purpose of the deferral?
We need some answers here. We have a project here that is 25% over what we budgeted for it. That's after we've spent $400,000 in consulting. That's just unacceptable. We need to. My first question, and yours was very much similar. What happens if this council turns this down? And the answer, I think, is that we will manage in the interim. So the way it is here now, I can't support it. So I'd like to give staff another 3 weeks to try to do some extra research to convince us. I know that'll make things tight, but that's the other scenario is that we don't get it done at all.
Which has issues associated with it. Ms. Fletcher?
I just wanted to provide one small point of clarification. When the comment is that we'll manage, and we may, but we are losing a site that we've used in the past. So I just wanted council to be aware of that there was a spot on Ardelt that we did use for snow storage in the past, but we will no longer be able to use that. So it's not that we will just be continuing the way we've continued or worked in the past. We're actually losing a site that we had available to us.
Councillor Marsh. Okay. Your comment, Councillor Galway-Seelock? Question or comment? Question, okay. Go ahead.
Maybe the same question I've already asked, but I do want to ask Dan specifically. If we were to decrease the pad size by 1/5, it would decrease it by 48 square meters. How much impact would that really have for the majority of our snowfalls or snow seasons?
Through the chair, operationally, I don't think it would impact to a large degree, but I don't believe that you're going to see the economy of scale in reducing it, and I don't think you're going to get a reduction that you're looking for either. But from an operational standpoint, reducing it by a little bit's going to hit 9 out of 10 or 8 out of 10 years, given what we've experienced to date. That doesn't mean that with the ever-changing weather that we get, we could see that that's maybe 2 out of 3 years going forward. I don't know. So there's no simple answer to that.
Is there the opportunity to store the snow any higher on a winter where it's more significant? Even though your pad size decreases, is there any opportunity? I know the plans already go pretty high. Is that an option, or is it regulated at a certain height?
Yeah, I think with equipment there's some options there. Again, you get into some safety concerns the higher you go, and impacts to residents the higher you go. So I think our goal would be to minimize some of those concerns to do it. And when you're going higher, you need to plan that from the start of a year, and we don't always know, midway into a year how heavy a year it's going to be. So it's hard to go higher once you've worked the pile all the way out to the extent of the pad, if you will. So you would then be getting up on the snow, which creates that safety concern to go any higher. So.
Right. I think that's all my questions. I just want to, before people make comment, give what my recommendation is going to be, just so everyone can look at that from as they're making their comments. Basically, I would support option D, but with the caveat that the additional funding be $300,000 and I take that from reducing the pad size and the additional 80 that comes from option D to get to $300,000.
Okay.
So that would be the amount, I guess, that would go in.
Well, assuming, depending on what happens with the deferral,
Right.
You can move an amendment to the
Right, I
motion
just
that
wanna
Councillor Ioannidis indicated.
Give
he was
everybody
gonna
that
do.
context when they're making.
Yep. Ms. Fletcher, you wanted to key in again?
Yeah, I just wonder, tagging on to Councillor Galloway-Seelock's question, if now that we have the diagram up, maybe Mr. Gross could explain what he was alluding to before, that the pad size reduction operationally is one question, but I think there were some environmental concerns that Mr. Gross was trying to point out, that if we reduce the pad size and we do not have the asphalt on top, then there's permeability of some of the salt residue. So I wonder if Mr. Gross could just maybe use the diagram to point out what he was talking about.
Go ahead, Mr. Gross.
So, Mr. Mayor, looking at the plan, the left side of the page is the top of the site. In other words, the drainage on that site goes from left down to right. The entrance to the site is at the bottom left. So they enter the site, turn right, and go directly down to the right side, which is at Huron Road. And that's where the snow pile starts to get piled up. And as you pile more snow, it moves the snow pile to the left of the drawing. Where we would save, through Councillor Galloway-Seelock's comments, in terms of not building the pad, would be on the left side at the top end of the site. Now, that's where the trucks enter, and this is why I'm saying this is where you've got a lot of activity going on. I would hate to not build some protection there, and not have the protection for the infiltration at that point. That's why I have difficulty in suggesting that we save in that location.
Councillor Galloway, questions still? Okay, go ahead.
Sorry to belabor this, but would there not be other capacity in other areas of the site to decrease the pad versus the front end? Could it not be on the upper right where along Huron Road where the pads decreased some and bring it lower towards Battler versus on the entryway?
Through the chair, the drainage is toward Huron Road, so you don't want to eliminate the pad. That's where you want the pad. That's where you want all the protection. As you head further toward the left, which is uphill, that's where the snow piles would start to peter out.
Okay, Daphne, are you able to scroll a couple, about 5 slides forward? I think you're going the wrong way. That one. So this is obviously the picture along Huron Road. So what I'm trying to say, and I'm not sure, understanding that all the snow's plan is to come down, if we decrease the amount of pad size that we have on the right-hand side of that photo, is that not a possibility to look at?
I would have to, I think the drainage is intended to move toward that direction, It's possible. I'd really have to look at the details of
Right,
that.
and then so then my question would be the left side. I don't know what the right
Yeah.
solution is. I'm just saying you're saying that the entry point you wouldn't want to decrease too much. I'm just saying overall take this pad, which is really large, and decrease it where it makes the most sense is what I'm trying to convey. I don't have the answer of where that would be. I'm not an engineer, and I know that the drainage is important and that all the environmental conditions are important and that we make sure we take care of this properly. So I don't want to jeopardize that at all. I'm just saying let's make the pad smaller, which we wouldn't be dumping snow off of the pad, right?
Through the chair, the answer is yes, we can look at it. What we were counting on was having the snow up against the berm, which in this case means that we would not be able to move the snow right up to the berm. We'd have to keep it back from the berm on that right side because we wouldn't be building the pad. Like the berm itself has to be built where it's designed. All we're talking about is decreasing the size of the pad, which means that the snow would be not stretched as far to the right as this picture shows.
So it's something you can look at.
Okay. So we've got comments now. So just so that people are clear, from a process point of view, I will be going to Councillor Gazzola's motion on deferral first, and then I'll be going to Councillor Ioannidis' motion from the report and Councillor Galloway's amendment. As you're making comments, please make them on all of the above. Councillor Singh?
Oh, you rung me in, but that kicked me out of the loop. So, but anyways,
I'll
that's
come back to it.
that's okay.
You were last in the loop anyway.
With the deferral, will that jeopardize the current tender? Did we get that question answered? I'm not sure. It was
Right. So the answer was the deferral will not jeopardize the tender, but it could or likely would jeopardize completion of the project.
The construction season, right. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Davey.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Nobody likes the situation that we're in. Council doesn't like the situation we're in. Staff isn't terribly happy with the situation that we're in. But this decision was not made lightly. It was not made without small amounts of information. I remember the consultant report was Bible thick when we've been dealing with this for 2 years. I'm hearing a lot of people upset about the cost of this, but what I'm not hearing are any real solutions. I mean, there's some question about the size of the pad, but that would have all been borne out of the consultant process, in my opinion. I'm not an engineer, and we have to rely on them. What we did cut, we cut some niceties. We were actually putting in a porta potty at this point. We're cutting the niceties, but we're not cutting the functionality. At some point, we're going to have to make a decision on this. I have enough information. I'm prepared to make a decision on this today. I'm not going to be supporting the deferral. I'm going to support the option D. That's before us. I think one of the other reasons we're struggling with this is, to be frank, from a political standpoint, it sounds ridiculous that the city of Kitchener is paying $3 million to melt snow. I'm sure there are a number of residents that are wondering why we can't go dump it in the Grand River, for example. The reality is we'll poison our river. These things cost money. Infrastructure costs money, and I think we just need to bite down and approve this, because it's something that we have to do not only to service the residents of Kitchener, but to make sure that we keep our environment clean.
Councillor Ioannidis.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Verbanovich. I agree with the similar comments that Councillor Davey had put forward. I'm not prepared to support a deferral. I mean, granted, this is something that's not really a sexy item that we're dealing with here, but it's a necessity. And you know, the consultants eyed this site as the #1 site, and you know, to start looking at other alternatives and everything else after we've already committed enough dollars to the consultants and everything else, and go back to the drawing board or whatever. I'm not prepared to go that route. I think we need to look at the future. We are a growing city. We just had some other options that our countryside line may expand. We don't know, so there's could be future growth that's not anticipated, as well as future removal of snow on sidewalks is an option that we could be looking at in the future. And again, this is something that residents, they value this service more than anything, is clearing snow. And I know in particular in the area that I live, and they do clear the snow, and I do get often comments, when's the snow going to be cleared? And we are looking at, even in our urban downtown, that we're looking at lesser sight lines and everything else. It's just going to get worse and compound. And I'm of the school of thought that, if you're going to do something, you're going to do it right, and make sure, instead of looking, doing it in a Mickey Mouse option, and I'm not prepared to support that, because I know the costs of what it costs to even service the properties that I've had over the years, and it's just very expensive, and to look at options of trucking and going everything else we're just playing around here. Let's just get the job done and do it right, and look for the future.
Councillor Singh.
Thank you. Initially, I was planning on supporting the deferrals just to ensure that we could get some answers to the questions. But as the conversation carried on, I think we're grasping at straws here and going around the similar question, where are the savings when the savings are quite limited with the options? Even with option D, which I will support, but I think we may be making a mistake with not including the bathroom, because sooner down the road, I think as quality of life to our employees, we may very well start having to answer that question of, should we have a appropriate facilities on a facility a size like this, and the cost will be higher. But the question is, how can we afford that? And because of the increased cost, I think that's the only reason I'm willing to support option D, and hopefully our employees and the contractors there will understand why we're limiting a basic facility like a bathroom there. As for the rationale of why or how are we doing this, simply put, building and carrying on the business of a city the size that we are and growing at the pace that we are is not cheap. These are necessary things as we grow out and grow out in a correct manner to ensure that we have safe roads, to protect our environment, and essential drinking water. So it's not, as Councillor Davies has put it very rightly, it's not about just melting snow. It's about very serious matters that need to be handled appropriately under the guidelines that are laid out by the province. We can't shortchange, we can't cut corners, otherwise we jeopardize a lot, not only of mandated requirements, which can cost the city and this corporation heavily as well. So based on that, because we have very limited choices, we have to support this, and we have to carry on our business.
Councillor Fernandez.
Thank you. So it's really hard to put a price tag on something that's not really tangible, and we don't know how much snow we're going to get this year or next year or in 5 years or 10 years. But we do hear all the time from our residents that we want our snow cleared, and it is part of our job. I think what's most concerning to me from the very beginning of this project was the COF was the original site, was part of the whole discussion. And to see it moved to an area that is in such close proximity to residents is very, very concerning. I think that's one of the reasons why we've had additional costs, because it is in proximity to the residential areas, and that's why we've had to add additional studies. It's in close proximity to Strasburg Creek, and that's why we've had to have additional studies. So we have to deal with it. I don't want to see us cutting down on the landscaping, although Mr. Gross, you've made a good case for that, and then certainly I understand why we would do that. Why would we pull something out 2 years later after it's just established? But it is a promise that we've made to our residents. Maybe there's something else we could do. I don't know. I'm willing to pull it out now, but maybe 2 years isn't such a long time, because by the time this is all said and done, we may be at that point already. So maybe, I could make nice with the residents about that. I don't know. But I definitely don't want to see us do anything that would reduce the noise. And my understanding from the consultant's report and the presentations at the public meeting is that we are expecting the snow along Huron Road to be a buffer for the noise, right? Is that okay? I'm not misspeaking on that. And we have to protect the environment. And I wish we had taken that into consideration. It was something that was said a number of times. What's done is done. I would like to support the deferral only because I think there may be a couple of things you can tweak and reduce. I don't know that it's a good idea to reduce the asphalt pad along Huron Road. I think that that's really the worst location to reduce it because of the reasons I've just mentioned. But I think there just may be a couple of other little tweaks you can look at and possibly reduce the overall cost. If the deferral fails, I'll probably be supporting option D. I hope that we can keep the trailer there. I think that, it's not a pretty place, but it will give a little bit of respite for our folks who are doing the snow loading there. It's worked for years. The guys who are doing the work, and the gals that may be working, let's hope they're okay with the trailer. The people that have been working at Battle Yards have been okay with it for a while. It's hard to swallow this cost. It really is. So that's where I stand on this right now. Just one more quick comment. $400,000 for consultant costs. I'm sorry, that's huge. And if there was any way we could have done some reduction on that, I really wish we could.
Councillor Galloway-Seelock.
Yeah. First of all, I want to make a point that we're not melting snow. We're building a pad for the snow to melt on. So this is not a facility where it's electronically going to melt snow. It's going to sit there until the sun melts it, which could be June, July, some years when the snow actually does leave the pad that's going to melt, that the snow is going to melt on. It's not a melting pad. I'm not willing to jeopardize other DC-funded projects to add additional funding to this project. I believe that we can manage with a smaller pad and have confidence that staff can make it work. And I asked them not to take my suggestion of where the pad should be decreased in size, but where it makes the most sense from an engineering perspective, from an environment perspective. I will not pretend to know. I was just trying to look at options here today where we could decrease the size of the pad. To say this is a Mickey Mouse option is offensive, and I've been a part of this process and questioned the size of the pad since day one. I asked for additional information on it for the budget time. It's been something that I've been trying to push for a long time to decrease the costs. And to say it's a Mickey Mouse option when I think every member of council should continue to look at ways to save taxpayers' money, no matter if it's a DC-funded project or a tax-supported project, is always something that I'm willing to do. I think, in my opinion, and it's not going to be everyone's opinion around this horseshoe obviously today, that a reduction in the pad size is something that we can do and that could be appropriate, and that I have the confidence in staff in working with this that they can come up with a system, because this is completely new to staff too, from actually an operational perspective of dealing with having our own snow dump site. And so I have the confidence that through the years that they would build up the knowledge in order to maximize this facility to the greatest potential, and having a little bit of a smaller pad without cutting any corners, without decreasing the environmental, not jeopardizing the environmental impacts, is something that they can do. And so I am putting forward the recommendation that an additional $300,000 be given to this project. At the end of the day, in giving that direction, staff could come up with a different scenario where they can see cuts for this project that may be more feasible or more palatable. Obviously, they didn't present them to us today, but if we give that direction of this is the amount that you have to work within, they're going to have to work within those parameters. But taking into account the $80,000 that can be reduced from the washrooms, the landscaping, and then an additional, from what my calculations, $280,000 from the mulching pad or wherever they see fit, is something that I think is manageable for this project. And I ask you to consider that as we move forward. I will not support the deferral. I think we need to move forward with this. I haven't had really any issue with the site. I am the ward councillor for the actual site, understanding Councillor Fernandez's residents are right across the street, and she represents them from the noise perspective. But I've sat through every single meeting, I've read every report, I've gone to every PIC, I've listened to everything staff have said. I can appreciate every minor detail, and so me asking this doesn't just come off the cuff. I will say again, it's not a Mickey Mouse option. It's something that I believe is feasible for the City of Kitchener, the residents, without decreasing our service levels.
Councillor Schneider?
Thank you, Mayor Vrivanovic. Well, it's clear that we don't have any options. The Ardelt site is no longer available to us. Temporary measures like melters may sound good here, but in truth, they're very expensive to operate, to fuel. They're not environmentally friendly. This is essential. We need this just for now, and not just for now, but also for the future. At the same time, we need to address the environmental issues. It's not like we're adding unnecessary options to some palatial building. This is not an easy decision. It's not a pleasant decision that we have to make. And I'm a little concerned that, if we do try to save a little bit of money now, it may be savings that we regret making later as we pay more later to address the future needs of this site. I'm willing to support option D.
Councillor Gazzola?
I'm not sure where to go on this. When this is all done, I think it's only wise to do the job right, and that's to include what needs to be done. I can't support not doing the landscaping for the people that live around the area. I can't support not having the proper facilities for the staff and the people that will be involved there. Those are all essentials, and they're an important part of this project. And the other part that I've fully realized is that this is not going to have any immediate impact on our taxpayers and their tax dollars for the next several years. This is the way it's being funded here. It's coming out of a pot of funds that we have, and taking whatever we do out of that pot, it's in a bit of a way, it's found money, and it's not going to have a great deal of impact. I just cannot, though, live with a project that came out right from the get-go at a very, very high price. We've spent tons and tons of money with consultants, and we come back and we're after all of that, we're 25% over what we plan to spend. I know that eventually we have to move ahead with it. I'm just trying to buy another 3 weeks so that staff can come back and consider some of these things and say, let's go ahead and do this. At that point, I'm prepared to support all of the things. I think they're all necessary, and in the long run, probably more economical to do them now. But I guess I have a sickness that I remember sitting on the other side of this horseshoe and often complaining and saying this can't be done, and the council of the day just giving me the Nike and say just do it. and I don't think we've ever done that. I think I'm prepared to really challenge staff, and I don't have any faults with staff. I know they've worked hard. I'm just asking to them to look at it one more time to see what we can do before we overexpend by 25%.
Councillor Marsh.
Don't laugh, Councillor Ioannidis. Okay? Show a little bit of respect.
Gentlemen. Councillor Marsh.
Okay, do I have the floor now? All right. So basically, I hear many different things around the horseshoe. I don't see the value in deferring this option at this point because I have confidence that staff has gone through and looked at the different options and tried to reduce costs here or there, but it does feel like a very high price to swallow. But if this is the cost to get it done, then this is what it costs. So I don't see how waiting 3 weeks is going to provide any value. So I also, though, cannot support option D because if we can save $40,000 by deferring the planting of significant dollar figure of trees and bushes and such, $40,000, I think that option C is the way to go because we should have proper facilities and a proper safety center for staff to be able to use. So option C is, if option D were to fail, then I would propose option C.
Any other comments before I make mine? Okay. Admittedly, I struggle with this one. I mean, I think you could tell that from my comments and my questions earlier on, and from the discussions I've had previously about this issue when I was first made aware of it from staff. But I guess in looking at all of these issues and weighing the pros and cons of the discussion, I also have to focus on what are some of the core services that the city delivers on. And quite frankly, one of those absolutely core services that we deliver on a regular basis is snow removal. And like it or not, we live in Canada. This is part of what we need to deal with, and dealing with this involves a cost, and it involves a cost that requires us to make sure we have the right facilities in place in order to do the work that we need to do. I get that the costs associated around this have come in significantly over budget. It's not the first project where that's happened, and I think we do need to continually look ways at better refining our processes so that we're not being faced with these situations when the tenders come back in. Because I think it does create challenges for council, it creates challenges for staff, and quite frankly, it creates challenges for the community who tries to follow these issues which are complex, and I think Councillor Davey was absolutely right. This isn't a sexy project. We're not building a community center. We're not building a swimming pool. Heck, we're not even putting in new water pipes to make sure that clean water is being delivered. Although, I guess in a way it's a bit ironic. What we're doing is actually going to help make sure that what's going back into the river is a little cleaner than what perhaps has been the experience in the past. I think in terms of any of these things that we're cutting back, particularly on the landscaping and on the washrooms, concern me. you know, the reality is we're going to have to do this landscaping. We're going to have to come back and put the money in later on. The bigger issue for me, quite frankly, is the bathroom. I mean, there's a certain amount of civility that needs to exist when it comes to employing staff. I mean, would we have City Hall in existence without a bathroom and say to people like, you know, go use a trailer out on the street? We wouldn't. And quite frankly, and this might sound a little crude, but the reality is we have historically probably had primarily male employees who would do this kind of work. I don't think we can assume that in the future. And male employees sometimes take liberties that female employees can't. And that is a further reason why I think, quite frankly, putting a proper bathroom in place is the right and decent thing to do if we're going to be making this decision this evening. So those are my comments. I would urge us to think about that, particularly that last piece. I think what we need to do is we'll deal with the deferral first. We'll then deal with the motion and the amendment in terms of the size of the reduction in the size of the platform, and then I would suggest that in fact we deal with basically the cut that's necessary. The additional funding that's necessary for the project, and then deal with the landscaping and the washroom facilities as separate votes as well. So that, because I'm hearing different things on those issues, so we can separate it out that way, and don't need to deal with a bunch of various votes in that regard. Okay? So with that, we'll deal with the motion to defer, and that's Councillor Gazzola, your motion. Is there a seconder for the deferral? Councillor Fernandez. Okay. Recorded votes have been requested. So we'll start with the motion to defer to August the 29th. Those in favor of the deferral? Those opposed to the deferral? The deferral doesn't carry. We'll now move on to the main motion, Councillor Ioannidis. And then Councillor Galloway-Seelock. Do you want to move your amendment? Okay. So are we clear on the amendment? I haven't asked for a written one. I probably should, but okay.
Blank from the recommendation, additional funding of $300,000 be allotted to. That's my motion, with the rest of the sentence completed.
With no specific mention to or any of the other stuff?
No, you said you're going to deal with them separately. I say 300,000 and staff can decide. And still take the vote later to say bathroom in, bathroom out. If it passes, It's not going to pass. So,
okay.
Okay. So it's probably irrelevant.
Okay, so I'll deal with the $300,000 reduction. Yes, madam. Sorry. We're in council, so I need a seconder for that motion for the 300,000 reduction. Seconded from Councillor Gazzola. Okay, thank you. So, recorded vote. All those in favor? Oh, wait, sorry. All those opposed? That's not successful. So next then we'll deal with the issue of the washroom facility. I'll deal washroom, escaping, and then the main The rest, the remainder of the additional money? Okay? Yeah. Okay, so we'll start with the washrooms. If you want to include the washrooms, it's yes. If you don't want to include the washrooms, it's no. Everyone clear on that? Oh, and sorry, the motion before it was divided up and was moved by Councillor Ioannidis, seconded by Councillor. Just the yes, yes. If you want the washroom money included, no. If you don't, yes. That'll be show as a no vote. Okay? Okay, you can. It's a negative vote, but the minutes will can reflect that he chose not to vote. I mean, it's being recorded. Yeah. All those in favor? Those opposed? Motion carries. So the bathrooms are included. We'll now deal with the landscaping. So if you want the funding for the landscaping included, vote yes. If you don't want it included, vote no. Those in favor? Those opposed? And the landscaping is not included. And now the balance, the funding for the balance of the overage. Yes, essentially. Correct. You need to correct your vote? Okay, can we redo it? Councillor Fernandez needs to correct her vote. Councillor Marsh, you have...
I just wondered if it could be reflected in minutes that the landscaping is going to be...
Can you move your mic closer to you?
I just wanted to ask that it be reflected in the minutes that landscaping is going to be included, but it'll be delayed. It'll be deferred until such time as Huron Road is redone. Yeah.
That's not what Mr. Gross
That's not what he said?
said. Mr.
That's
Gross?
what I thought he said.
Mr. Gross?
Through the mayor, the landscaping along Battler would be included at the time that the large storm sewer is extended along Battler Road,
Battler.
which is within 2 years, 3 years.
Okay. Did we just vote against landscaping along Huron Road, or is that not reduced?
The landscaping along Huron Road was never in question. It was not offered.
It was not offered.
It was not offered as a reduction.
It's in the project.
It's in.
Thank you. Okay.
Okay, so everyone clear? So we're voting now on the main part of the project and the additional funding? All those in favor? All those opposed? The motion carries. And I think that's all I need to do on that issue. Yes, we have to go into the tender document now, but in terms of that report, yes. Okay, so we'll now move on to the tender document. And so it would be option C that we're voting on, and someone would, well, but now we have to vote on the tender. Okay, so I need someone to move option C on the tender. Okay, Councillor Marsh, is there a seconder? Councillor Singh? Okay, so option C, recorded vote has been called. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. We'll now go back to item number 5 on the special council agenda. Councillor Galloway-Steel.
Moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Dave Schneider that the 3 noise exemptions that were passed in committee be moved forward. But I will note that the first one on number 5, Lawrence Avenue is actually changed. We changed the address in the committee to, I think it's called Goucher Court, 66 Goucher Court. We made that change in committee. I'm just making sure it's reflected on your council agenda.
Okay, so clerks will make sure that they capture that. It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Item number 6, Councillor Galloway-Steel.
Moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Dave Schneider that Bill 204, Promoting Affordable Housing Act, be approved. Sorry, that the recommendation from the committee be approved.
Okay, Councillor Singh.
Actually, I had an amendment to the recommendation. This is pretty much to address the last point that we had talked about, ensuring that the recommendations include our articulation of balanced distribution of affordable housing along all municipalities and lower tier municipalities. So I can give this to...
Sorry, I wasn't in the room when you guys dealt with that.
I believe it was implied in that as part of the recommendation, and that staff took the notes on that and that they were following up on that.
So that's what we're approving right now.
So
it'll be reflected in the committee minutes, and that's...
Actually, I had conversation with both Mr. Salone and Mr. Pinard, and it was with assistance with Mr. Pinard that this was articulated.
Okay.
They said this would be helpful to have, otherwise they're not receiving its direction. So they did require direction.
Okay, I saw them taking notes. I saw them nodding their heads that they would
They
include
did,
that
but this
in their
is
feedback.
Yeah, I went to them to ensure that was the case, but they requested as direction.
Okay,
So, yeah.
so we'll take that as an amendment.
This came only through their encouragement.
Okay, so we'll vote on the amendment. Is there a seconder for the amendment? Councillor Davey? We'll vote on the amendment first then. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. And on the motion as amended, all those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Can I have someone move 3 readings, please? Councillor Ioannidis, Councillor Schneider. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Motion to adjourn. Councillor Fernandez, Councillor Marsh. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. And we'll continue in caucus in 5 minutes.